Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the AFR EMS case studies. My name is Chris Ortiz. I'm the EMS Division Chief for Albuquerque Fire Rescue, and today I am joined with Lieutenant David Baca and driver Gabe Healy. Welcome.
Thanks, Chief.
Thanks for having us.
All right, thanks for joining us. So today we have an interesting case to talk about. It's in regards to a carbon monoxide or inhalation call where we used the Cyanokit. So I wanted to talk through it a little bit more on what you guys did and what you guys saw. So let's talk about the dispatch. This call originally came in as a 69 Delta as a structure fire. Is that correct?
Right.
Yep.
Okay, so you guys are en route to that structure fire. Give us an idea of what you saw when you arrived and what you all did.
So we came from kind of a different way because we were initially dispatched to 17 Alpha, and we ended up seeing smoke coming from the house, in the air just from a little ways away. And so kind of roundabout way, as we showed up, we did see smoke coming out of the second story, one of the second story windows on the Alpha side of the structure. So we also saw a bunch of SWAT, BCSO, I believe, and U.S. Marshals were there with ARs out, aimed at the house. And so we pulled off quite a ways away from the structure.
Okay, so obviously some scene security issues, law enforcement was involved. It sounds like you couldn't make an initial attack with the suppression crews and do a primary search right off the bat like we normally do. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
All right, so when you finally were able to, at what point were you able to commence some of the suppression and rescue activities? How long were you guys on scene before you made entry into the structure?
The engine came in on the 69 Delta, but they came in from a different direction. At that point, one of the gentlemen that was a BCSO guy waved them in, even though the scene was not secure, but totally gave them the green light to go in front. The engine wound up parking in front of the structure where they normally would park to fight a fire. And they all got out, bunkered up, ready to fight a fire. And they were brought behind the engine on the driver's side to kind of shield them from the house. So what we've started to learn a little bit more was that there was a active shooter, somebody with a gun inside of the house, and BCSO chased him upstairs, and he then lit the house on fire. So they had no idea of where he was. They had no idea what was going on. They started seeing smoke. That's when they involved us in that call. The engine was there, but like I said, they were not hiding. They were behind the engine, and it wasn't for about an hour and a half until some firefighting was involved. The next idea, which was a brilliant idea by whoever was chief in that day, we got the ladder involved. The ladder parked out of the way, but they set it up where they could go ahead and spray kind of at an angle just to knock down some flames through a window. And that's kind of where we started at, but that wasn't until about an hour and a half into kind of watching this thing just kindle a little bit. As soon as they punched out that window, it actually gave it some oxygen, and that thing started roaring a little bit more right away. The whole time, our guys are sitting behind shields and sitting behind trucks, and we're about a block away, hanging out with the on the outskirts. So not a lot of firefighting was done right off the bat.
Oh, absolutely. And scene safety is always the primary concern. I listened to this call live as it was happening, and kudos to Battalion Chief Mike Rogers, who I think was running command that day and did an excellent job of keeping folks safe and waiting until they actually could safely make entry. So from my recollection of listening to the call, we finally made entry. We started the suppression efforts, and then after an hour or so in, like you talked about, then we were able to perform a primary search. My understanding is we were able to locate a victim inside of that home secondary to the primary search. Where did you find that individual, and how did that play out?
So we had done a primary search. I think Rescue 20, I think Engine 15, and one other crew decided that we didn't want to go into the garage because that door was shut, and we decided that that would probably be the only safe place for the individual to be. And we decided that was one area that we didn't want to go in. And so we searched the rest of the house, and it was an all clear for the rest of the house. We came out not knowing that another crew was still inside, started talking to BCSO, and started making a plan of how they wanted to enter the garage. As we were talking about it, one of the crews came out of the garage. They had actually kind of gone in, didn't do a full search of the garage, but opened the garage door. And so at that point, BCSO and U.S. Marshals went in to search the garage, and happened to find the individual in a chest freezer. It sounded like he kind of popped out of the freezer, and they were able to. They had mentioned that he got tased. I never saw any taser darts or anything like that, and so they, took the individual down and brought him out to the street. We actually weren't even ready for an individual or a patient at that point, thinking that maybe he was not even in the house anymore.
Oh, that's great. And great use of law enforcement to totally secure that area, checking every area that the patient could be in and finding him in that freezer. That's definitely not a regular circumstance. So they were able to secure him, get him into handcuffs to be able to safely pull him out of the building. And I think it was reported initially that it might have been a cardiac arrest. Turns out that it wasn't. You guys asked Alarm to recode or actually just basically create a medical call for you, and then you started your interventions. So after the person is safely secured outside of the structure, the house is now all clear. Tell me how the individual presented. How did the patient present when you contacted him?
So the individual, I guess the BCSO officers had already handcuffed him, and so they placed him on his chest on the street. And it was kind of funny because I think there was about 50 of us there, just kind of staring at him. And I asked the U.S. Marshals or BCSO guys to turn him over, just get him off his chest and make sure that, he wasn't hogtied, type of thing, that was able to breathe. Turned him over on his side, and the patient was breathing, checked a pulse real quick, and it was pretty regular, slightly fast, but not anything out of the ordinary. And I think at that point, Gabe looked at me and said, "I'm going to get the truck." And
that was one of the things that kind of took after that and went. We were there for a fire. We're there to do firefighter stuff. When it didn't become firefighter stuff, I still walked away from my staging of my rescue and all my medical bags and everything. So I had to do a slight jog down the street to go get my rescue to then even bring up anything, because all the other trucks were in firefighter mode. So switching from that firefighter mode, it's a little bit easier to do. When you find somebody, you bring them out, you're back in the EMS mode. We already started doing the slap hands and handshakes of guys you haven't seen in forever, and then a patient was brought to us. So we had to switch it on pretty quick. Lieutenant Breen was there, and Lieutenant Baca and Breen actually got started with some of the assessment while I ran and got my truck and brought up the bags at that point.
So you're seeing soot in the airway, obviously.
Yes, sir.
You didn't see any obvious burns. You had a patient who was tachycardic, low sats, I assume. And what did you see on capnography?
So we didn't, I don't believe we got him on capnography until we got in the back of the truck. But we did get him on O's pretty quickly, and decided that we were going to be transporting. I think AAS told us that they were quite a ways away, and so it was a quick decision. I believe the capnography was about 16, so it was pretty low. And with that, kind of thinking, that the patient could be acidotic. Definitely saw the soot in the airway when we got him into the back of the rescue. And I think decided at that point that would be a good idea to use the Cyanokit, knowing that he had been in the house for about 2 to 3 hours. I think Drew Harrell was there, and he was the one that handed me the Cyanokit initially. And I just asked AJ to reconstitute it for us and get that going as I was kind of trying to manage the scene a little bit.
Absolutely.
And figure out everything else that was going on and what we needed to do.
That's great work. So we had the cyanide and carbon monoxide, obviously two big considerations when we're pulling anybody out of a structure fire. You provided the O2, you guys gave them a BVM, it's got some IO access, and then you started to constitute the Cyanokit, which we know that is carried on our 7-8 unit, all of our battalion chief units, as well as the two squads, Squad 1 and Squad 3. Talk us through real quick, if you can, on how you constituted that, because I know a lot of people haven't had the opportunity to get hands-on because these are rare cases.
Yeah, so since I didn't actually reconstitute it, I have done one of these before. However, it's kind of nice because there's directions on the box, and they're really easy to follow. And so, when we're reconstituting it, there's a double-sided, I call them pokies.
Double-sided spiker.
Double-sided spiker. So this goes into the Cyanokit vial on one side. The 250cc bag goes in on the other side. And basically you fill up to, there's a line generally on this bottle that you fill it up to. It should be about 200 cc's that you're filling. And so you'll have 200 cc's in this bottle. Once you've filled this up, you can go ahead and take that out. And all you're going to do is just turn it back and forth for about 60 seconds. You can actually turn it on its top and just kind of rotate it however you want. It shouldn't be shaken. And so that's basically how you reconstitute it. And then you just plug in. There's usually some tubing that comes with this, and it kind of has like an aeration so that the fluid can actually flow out of the bottle. And then you'll just stick that in just like a normal IV.
I think with the Cyanokit, it's real nice to have somebody that isn't hands-on with the patient be able to do that, because there is a process of spiking it. And if you haven't done one in a while, kind of looking at the box just to make sure you're doing it right. But with that double-sided spiker, spiking it, squeezing the bag in, and just kind of giving your swirls, if you have hands to hand it off to somebody, you should be able to hand that off to somebody, because me trying to swirl and start an IO and that first 2 minutes of getting a patient's always chaotic, and this is what the patient needs.
Absolutely. And I think with our operational response to structure fires, luckily we do have a lot of hands on deck, so being able to delegate those tasks to other folks I think is key while you're focusing on patient care. So great job, outstanding call from start to finish, from the suppression side to the EMS side. I think everybody did fantastic. We talked about the fact that during your transport you not only took care of the airway, you started the IV or IO access, gave the Cyanokit, you also did EKG tracing of the patient, realizing that they could have other things going on top of the inhalational exposure. So I think you guys did a fantastic job, and then expeditious transport and making that quick decision, even though it wasn't something you were expecting. So hats off to you guys.
Yeah, thank you.
So just touch on that. The Cyanokit needs its own dedicated line, of course, and we wound up doing a second IO for the other side just to get some fluids in. But one of the issues that I had is when this was handed to us, this little tab right here, the hanging tab was ripped off, and we had to get very creative on how to get this to hang on something. So just got out some tape and taped it on, but just trying to figure out other ways, because this box, I think it was wet for some reason. I think the hands that were spiking it had their wet gloves on and kind of ruined this box for us. So just having that extra set of tape right there was real nice to kind of be able to just tape that thing onto the IV pole to kind of make it work on that side of it. And then once we got to the hospital, I taped the Cyanokit to the IV bag that I had started on the other side. That way they knew this was what that line was dedicated for.
Awesome.
So
ingenuity. Leave it to firefighters. We'll come up with a way. So
with
fantastic.
Enough tape, I gotcha.
MacGyver's pretty good over here.
That's fantastic. Well, strong work, gentlemen. I really appreciate you taking the time to come talk to us today. This is a skill that's necessary, and it's rarely used. So I think we encourage folks to get their hands on with the kits themselves, look through them, kind of practice, obviously not mixing or constituting, but working with 7-8 if you're not comfortable with it, so everybody's on the same page when we get to these fires. So outstanding job,
absolutely.
And thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Thanks, Chief.
So that's it for today's session. If you have any other case studies that you'd like to submit, please go through our SharePoint tab, and otherwise we'll see you next time. Thanks.